My mother-in-law secretly planned a baby shower, then told me my parents weren't invited because it was only for her family. So I took her advice and threw a party without her. When my husband Emmett and I found out I was pregnant, we knew exactly how our parents would react. My parents were beyond excited. They'd always been supportive, and I knew they'd make amazing grandparents. Alexa, my mother-in-law, reacted differently than you'd expect from someone about to become a grandmother. She was excited, sure, but more concerned about how this baby would affect her life than about us becoming parents. To be clear, Alexa and my parents never got along, and it was always because of her. She had this superiority complex. She looked down on my parents like she was better at everything: parenting, lifestyle, even silly things like Christmas traditions. She constantly made passive-aggressive remarks about how she'd raised Emmett the right way and how my parents were too laid back. My mom is straightforward and never tolerated Alexa's condescending attitude. She would call her out directly. My dad, on the other hand, preferred to ignore her and avoid unnecessary drama. He'd always say, "You can't live your life worrying about every ant that crosses your path." He didn't care much about what others thought, especially people who weren't worth the energy. That only fueled Alexa's resentment and made her more determined to assert herself. She saw herself as the most important figure in Emmett's life and treated my parents like obstacles, not family. It was clear she'd never respect them, and my parents had no interest in winning her over either. A few months into the pregnancy, Emmett started dropping hints that his mom was planning a baby shower. I was surprised. She never mentioned anything to me. And since I was the one carrying the baby, you'd think she'd at least keep me in the loop. At first, I assumed she was still figuring things out and would eventually talk to me about it. But over time, I realized she had already made decisions, without asking for my input. I wasn't even sure if I'd be invited. That suspicion was confirmed when I overheard her on the phone, talking about the party she was throwing, and how it would be a celebration for her family. When I asked her about it, she acted like it was all settled. She had chosen the venue, the theme, and even the guest list. She never asked me who I wanted there. According to her, I was just supposed to show up. That's when I found out my parents weren't invited. I had to ask if it was a mistake or if she'd left them out on purpose. She told me she didn't invite them because this is a celebration for our side of the family. She said my parents didn't need to be there, they'd have plenty of time with the baby after it was born. I won't lie, I was upset. This was my first baby, my pregnancy, my experience. And she had taken over everything while excluding my own parents. I told her that if my parents weren't welcome, then I wouldn't be attending either. She said if I didn't show up, the party wouldn't make sense, since it was to welcome my baby. She insisted I should be grateful she was doing all this for me. But then she made it clear, it wasn't about me. It was about the baby and her family. I tried to reason with her, but she refused to back down. She even doubled down and said she didn't want strangers at the event. That was insane. My parents aren't strangers. They're just as much a part of this baby's life as she is. But Alexa wouldn't budge. She made it clear she felt entitled to make those decisions, because it was her grandchild. That's when I decided I wasn't going to argue anymore. I followed my dad's approach: if she wanted to throw a party for herself and her side of the family, she could go ahead. But I wasn't going to be part of it. Instead, I planned my own baby shower. My best friend helped me organize everything. We invited the people I wanted to be there: my parents, close friends, and family from both sides. As you can guess, Alexa wasn't on the guest list. When she found out, she was furious. She accused me of being disrespectful, of wasting her time and, more importantly, disrespecting her. She said throwing a second party and not inviting her was petty. But the truth is, she gave me the idea. She showed me what kind of party not to have. One where I had to invite people out of obligation. So I threw one where I didn't. And she had made it very clear that her celebration was only for her side of the family. So, I respected her wishes and threw my own event, with my family and friends. She refused to take any responsibility for what had happened and immediately played the victim. Emmett went around telling people that I had excluded her, acting as if she was the one being mistreated. She even warned Emmett to watch for signs of manipulation, saying it could lead to problems in the future. Alexa wouldn't let it go. She kept bringing it up with other relatives, trying to make herself the center of attention. She even sent me this incredibly long email, saying she was heartbroken, claiming we were treating her like a stranger, when all she wanted was to celebrate her grandson. My response was something like, "I'm celebrating with my side of the family. I'm sure you can understand." Which wasn't technically true, because some of Emmett's relatives were there, but I considered them family, unlike how she treated mine. And probably unlike how she sees me, too. To her, I'm just some pregnant cow delivering babies for her. I don't think she understands. In her mind, if she does something, it's perfectly fine. But if anyone dares do it to her, the world is ending. She's so wrapped up in her own version of reality that no amount of logic will ever get through. She even tried to get Emmett to convince me to apologize and fix things by inviting her, not just to my party, but also to let her attend hers as well. Luckily, he stood by me and told her she had brought this on herself. Of course, she didn't take that well either, but this is someone who probably doesn't even take her morning whiskey well. Yes, she actually said she had more right to be in the baby's life than my parents, just because she's the paternal grandmother. Maybe that day she'd been drinking, and probably the cheap kind, the one that tastes like rubbing alcohol. And that was all before the party. Afterwards, things only got worse with Alexa. She had spent money on her special baby shower, and she was furious that I hadn't invited her to mine. She kept bringing it up in family conversations, making passive-aggressive comments, playing the victim. She even tried to manipulate Emmett into planning another baby shower, one that included her. When Emmett told her one party was enough, she started complaining to other family members. Most of them told her to calm down. But she had zero self-awareness, and her behavior just got worse. She started interfering in every part of my pregnancy, acting like she had a right to be involved in every decision. She wanted all the details about my doctor's appointments. She insisted on helping decorate the nursery, even though I didn't want her input. She even said she should be the first one to meet the baby after he was born. And she didn't just say it, she wanted it in writing. A signed agreement. Probably drafted by her, just to make it official. Emmett tried talking to her, mostly because he saw the look on my face that said, if I hear her voice one more time, I'm throwing a vase at her head. But do you think she listened to her son? So, we took the only option left. We had a lawyer draft a formal letter, which cost us $500, telling her to stop harassing us or we'd take legal action. A restraining order would have been more direct, but we couldn't get one. Her level of harassment wasn't officially enough to qualify. So, our next step is probably installing anti-aircraft missiles around the house, in case she decides to bombard us with more sob stories about being a loving grandma. That's basically what it takes before we can qualify for a restraining order. Because apparently, just telling someone no, and having them keep trying, isn't enough for a judge. Even threatening that she'll never see the baby again, or hearing her own son say, "You can forget about me too," still isn't enough. Maybe it's time to check Craigslist for some second-hand turrets at a good price. Update number 1. I had the baby a few weeks ago, well before the anti-aircraft turrets I ordered ever arrived. You know, you have to disassemble them, box them up, then head to FedEx to ship them, real hassle. But seriously, the last few months of the pregnancy were already stressful enough, with Alexa's madness and no restraining order in sight. I had hoped that once the baby arrived, things would calm down. And, for a while, she was surprisingly quiet. Too quiet. She sent a few congratulatory messages, nothing dramatic. No surprise visits, no passive-aggressive comments. I should have known she was just lying in wait. Then, out of nowhere, she made a huge announcement. She was throwing another party, a baby celebration, complete with invitations, decorations, and a guest list filled with people we barely even knew. She didn't ask if we agreed, she just sent us the event details like it was already happening. We didn't agree. I had just given birth. The last thing I wanted was a party. Emmett told her we wouldn't be attending, and that this violated the letter we had sent through the lawyer. She acted like we were the unreasonable ones, and said she'd go ahead with it anyway. She claimed she'd already put too much effort into it. We told her fine, do whatever you want, just leave us out of it. Of course, that wasn't enough for her. She tried to guilt-trip me. She said this was her moment too, and that I was being unfair for keeping the baby all to myself. As if I had just gone through 9 months of pregnancy and hours of labor just so she could throw a party. But the final straw came when she tried to take over completely. Since we weren't bringing the baby to her event, she decided to bring the event to us. One afternoon, a group of her friends and relatives showed up in front of our house, expecting to see the baby. She had told them we were hosting a small gathering. Of course, we had never agreed to anything like that. I refused to open the door. I stayed inside with my newborn while Emmett stepped out and asked everyone to leave. Alexa acted completely shocked. She said she didn't think we'd react like that, as if ambushing us with a crowd of people was totally normal. That's when I said, enough. I told Emmett to call the lawyer and file for harassment. We had proof, photos of the surprise crowd, recent messages, everything. It was enough to make the case strong enough that maybe she'd never show her face near us again. Now, of course, she's playing the victim again, saying she feels hurt that we're suing her. And I know she's out there trying to make me look like the bad guy. At this point, the only thing I care about is the outcome of the lawsuit. But of course, the drama didn't stop there. This woman doesn't care that she's being sued, she just keeps digging herself deeper. Honestly, I want a dump truck to pour quicksand on her head just to speed things up. A few days later, she posted on Facebook saying she was ready to hire lawyers to make sure I never see her grandson again. She said this was proof of what a terrible daughter-in-law I am, and that her son had been lobotomized by me. I didn't even care, just more material for my lawyer. Maybe now we're getting to the point where the restraining order might actually be granted. I don't know. But what shocked me the most, and truly showed her desperation, was what she did next. She contacted my parents, trying to convince them to talk sense into me. She told them she was concerned about my mental health, and that what I was doing wasn't something a sane person would do. The irony is beautiful. My parents, who probably hate Alexa more than anyone other than me, told her exactly what you'd expect. She could go dig a hole, bury her head in it, and wait until we called her. Right now, my focus is on the baby and on recovering. That's why we paid the lawyer, to handle all of this. And we didn't hire a lawyer to mediate or find some peaceful agreement. We hired a guy who did 2 tours in Iraq. This man drinks napalm in the morning because coffee no longer works for him. I'd pay extra to watch him spit that fire in Alexa's face and watch her melt like the Wicked Witch of the West. And yes, I already asked. That service is not included. But yeah, that's basically where we're at. Alexa refuses to stop, and this is our only legal recourse. No, we didn't even think about calling the police when she first showed up. Because if the court system won't even grant a restraining order for all this, cops are definitely not going to think she's doing anything wrong. I know. Justice where we live is lacking. You don't have to tell me. Update 2. Of course, the law doesn't work when victims need help. But when someone gets manipulated by a poor grandma who's been cut out by her son and some of her family, suddenly the law is wide awake. It all started with a New Year's Day message from Emmett. He asked if we were really planning to keep Alexa away from our son forever. He said Alexa had been looking into her legal rights. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. But then I started getting messages from other family members saying the same thing. Alexa was talking about pursuing grandparents' rights. At first, I laughed. It sounded ridiculous. She had no legal standing. We weren't neglectful parents, and we weren't keeping her away out of cruelty. We were suing her for harassment, and only because the court wouldn't give us a restraining order. But the more I read, the more I realized she was serious. Apparently, she'd spoken to a lawyer and convinced herself that she had a right to visit her grandson. And because we weren't letting her be a grandmother on her terms, she was going to force her way in. She probably thought she had a case just because she wasn't getting control. She was furious. But not nearly as furious as Emmett. He immediately called his aunt, Alexa's sister, who was still on speaking terms with her but supported us. He asked if she knew what her sister was up to. She admitted that yes, Alexa had been talking about lawyers, but she thought it was just venting, some kind of power play to scare us into backing down. I started looking into the grandparent rights laws in our area. Thankfully, from everything I found, she had no case. To win any rights, she'd have to prove that we were harming our child or putting him in danger. And I don't need a law degree to know that we're protecting him from a giant rat trying to sneak her way into his life. We're exterminating her legally. At this point, we're not even afraid of her, she's just annoying. But if there's one silver lining, it's that all of this is just fuel for our lawsuit. Our lawyer assured us her legal claims are baseless. Trying to sue us for visits is just more harassment, and you can't use the law to hurt someone. So, our case is getting stronger by the day. Honestly, if she really wants to fight for visitation rights, maybe we'll counter and ask that she pay child support and still never see him. We're not actually going to do that, of course. But when we win this case, it'll feel like she's paying for it anyway. Update 3. Alexa did end up trying to file for visitation rights. The court dismissed it faster than she finishes her morning cocktail. The hearing was quick. The judge glanced through the paperwork, told her not to waste his time with family squabbles, and shut it down on the spot. There was no evidence of abuse or neglect. Her only arguments were that she wasn't allowed to see our son and that we hadn't gone to her baby shower. At least she didn't mention the surprise party she tried to throw in our home. The judge, a big, no-nonsense man of color, took off his glasses, looked her straight in the eyes, and asked, "Don't you have any hobbies?" Her lawyer tried to file a motion to have the judge removed from the case. The judge told him, "You might want to file for a license review while you're at it." Safe to say they didn't pursue that further. Our lawsuit is still moving forward. We haven't had our court date yet because Alexa's lawyer is still scrambling to prepare a defense. But I don't think they can delay it much longer. And if we win, there's a good chance we'll get that restraining order, on top of everything else. That would have solved so many things earlier, or maybe not. With how insane she is, and how much she clearly drinks, that restraining order might have just been an invitation for her to go full crazy. Which brings me to this. One afternoon, I noticed a car parked at the end of our street. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But after looking more closely, I realized it was Alexa's car. I couldn't see inside clearly, but I knew it was her. What was she waiting for, me to walk out and check the mailbox so she could sprint out of her car and run inside before I got back? I like walking slowly. This woman can't run that fast. She'd spontaneously combust. And then we'd have to explain to the neighborhood HOA why the street is scorched with cheap whiskey. I told Emmett. We called the police and reported a suspicious car watching houses from the street. When the cops showed up, I stayed inside with the baby. Emmett went outside to talk to them. And yes, it was Alexa. And no, the police didn't do anything. Because technically, she wasn't breaking any laws. But still, Emmett, the cops, and Alexa had a chat. From the window, I could see Alexa crying and gesturing like she was begging. Emmett didn't budge, and the cops eventually told her to leave. Even after hearing the full story, how we got to this point, the cops didn't arrest her or even give her a warning. She left. Then the cops left. Later, Emmett told me what she said. She still refused to admit she'd done anything wrong. Instead, she kept justifying her actions, claiming we'd forced her into this, that we were being unfair, and that we had left her no choice. She even told one of the officers that if they let her see her grandson and speak to me, she'd invite him to the baby celebration. Both officers looked at each other like, is this woman for real? Unfortunately, no officer smelled alcohol on her breath. But to be fair, it had already been hours since her breakfast. I joke about her drinking in the morning, but based on her behavior, I'm starting to think it's not really a joke. At first, I figured she was just regrouping. Planning her next move. Maybe she'd rent a small plane and parachute into our backyard. If the wind's in our favor, maybe she'll land in the neighbor's flower garden instead. I'm sure that would get their dog unleashed while she's still trying to untangle her parachute. Now that's a scene I'd pay to see. But she's been quiet. And that's what scares me the most. Because with Alexa, silence doesn't mean she's finally eating oranges in the morning instead of chugging gin. It means she found a new brand of industrial-strength drain cleaner, and things are about to explode. Anyway, our civil lawsuit continues to feed off her nonsense. And we're using everything we've got. I hope the next update brings closure, and that it's the last one. Update 4. This is the update I've been waiting to write. The end of our lawsuit. We had our hearing, and we got the judge's decision. Spoiler, the judge didn't like Alexa either. Mostly because he didn't give her the answer she wanted. But before I get into the verdict, here's a quick recap of Alexa's latest stunts over the past few months. They weren't many, and none were particularly dangerous, but one in particular was bizarre and actually hilarious. Apparently, she attended a baby shower for one of her friend's grandchildren. We're not sure if she was actually invited herself, or just showed up unannounced. She spent the whole afternoon posting pictures to Facebook like that baby was her own grandchild. Small detail. Her friend is the mother of the baby's mother, meaning Alexa was playing the exact role my mom should have had in our story. The irony practically wrote itself. As for the trial, it was pretty straightforward. We had tons of evidence. Messages, calls, surprise visits, witness statements from family, and, of course, from my parents. They called me all week leading up to it with questions like, "What tie should I wear?" Or, "How early should we show up just in case?" They arrived at the courthouse 2 hours early. I'm pretty sure the building wasn't even open yet. Anyone who doesn't know them would think they're just extra cautious. But I know the truth, they were so eager to see Alexa fall, they weren't about to let a hurricane, an earthquake, or a zombie apocalypse get in their way. Thanks to their support, and all the receipts, we won. The judge ruled in our favor and awarded us just under $22,000. But even more valuable, a restraining order. Alexa is now legally required to stay at least 150 meters away from us. So her little game of parking in front of our house? That's over. But this isn't just any restraining order. Now I understand why these aren't handed out easily. Because this one has teeth. Usually, breaking one results in a warning or a fine. Not this one. If Alexa violates it, she goes straight to prison for 1 full year. It's valid for 5 years. And honestly, I'm happy with the outcome. It took a hell of a journey to get here. A lawyer, who Alexa now has to help pay for. Multiple Alexa-level meltdowns. 5 anti-aircraft batteries, and 3 pairs of hidden tripwire glasses buried in our yard. But we now have a gold standard restraining order. Oh, and the $22,000 isn't bad either. After the court hearing, my parents ran into Alexa in the hallway. And they thanked her for the financial windfall. I doubt she cares about the money. At least, not the way we do. But I'm sure it's stunned to have those inferior people. As she sees my parents laughing in her face. Now it's time for me to enjoy my family, my peace, and my freedom from drama.